Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We'll get started in just a minute as we wait for folks to come into the webinar. Thanks. If you could, while we're waiting, you should see a chat button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself. So just enter who you are, where you're from. That would be great, so we know who's on the call today. So we're still waiting for some folks to join us, but we will get started in just a second. And while we're waiting, I'm going to put a poll up on the screen. Just a quick question. We got a couple of these today, but I'm going to launch it here and just let us know if you're calling from or you're joining from an institution that's part of the ATD network or not. Maybe you're not sure, or maybe you're somewhere else. So if you could, that'd be great if you could let us know where you're coming from. Great, thanks already. We're seeing a lot of responses come in, and just as folks continue to join us, I want to go ahead and get started so we have time to kind of get through our session today. Welcome to today's webinar, Online Teaching Through Disruption, Strategies for Rapidly Moving Online. My name is Richard Sebastian, and I'm the Director of Open and Digital Learning at Achieving the Dream. And I want to welcome you here today for what is the first of a series of webinars that we'll be doing over the next 4 weeks. And so before I introduce the presenter for today, I wanted to take a moment just to provide some context for this webinar series and also do a little bit of a housekeeping. First, I wanted to just, I'm asking more rhetorically, but hope everybody is doing okay. This is, I think it's important to acknowledge the circumstances we find ourselves in. And I don't know about you, but I've heard the word unprecedented about 20 times a day. But it really does describe where we are at this moment. So we're in uncharted territory, kind of at every level of society, globally, educationally, personally, politically. So I think it's entirely appropriate just to acknowledge that at the top of the call today. Take a few deep breaths and know it's going to be okay. What we hope to accomplish from today's webinar and the ones that we are going to have over the next few weeks is to provide you with just-in-time resources that you need to really address this unprecedented situation that we're in. Many I would say probably at this point, most campuses are closed for the most part and have moved online very quickly. And so we want to really be responsive to kind of what the needs are for the college. As many of you know, Achieving the Dream had scheduled its second Teaching and Learning Summit for the end of April. We have canceled that, of course. But when we met to talk about what we would do instead, do we offer a virtual summit? Do we postpone it? Are there some other options? What we came up with was one of the things that was going to be this series of webinars to really, hopefully, be responsive to figure out and support colleges where they are now, really facing the kind of immense challenges that you face. So that's really our goal with this. Before we get started, I want to have a couple of housekeeping items. We're recording this webinar, and so we will email the links to the webinar recording and to the slides. So if you're in this session, you'll receive a follow-up email with the kind of the links that you need. We have quite a few people registered today, over 500, which is really great. But for that reason, your audio and video are disabled, so you're not going to be able to kind of turn on your video and audio. But you can communicate with us. We do want to hear from you a number of ways. So as you're doing now, many of you are introducing yourselves in the chat. If you could use that for posting questions that you have for us throughout today's session. We've got some folks, myself and my colleague Shauna Taylor, are behind the scenes monitoring the chat, collecting your questions, and we will have a Q&A session after the kind of formal presentation today. So we do want to hear what your questions are. And so on an ongoing basis, just kind of put them in the chat if they come up, and we'll try to get to them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presenter's presentation. We have 3 more of these webinars scheduled for the next 3 weeks. The topics of those have not really been determined yet. We want to hear from you about what your needs are. We don't want to, again, we don't want to make assumptions that that we know what you're facing. So there will be a survey link that we'll send out near the end of today's webinar, where you can let us know, was today's session, did it work for you? Are there, additional topics or questions that you have you'd like us to cover? And so you certainly can, we encourage you to fill out that survey. And we're looking to do a quick turnaround, so we have these topics set. And so if you could do it as soon as possible, we're looking noon tomorrow to really try to nail down the other topics. So if you can do that, would be great. So I'm going to, hopefully folks have had a chance to let us know where they're coming from. There's a poll up on the screen, but I'm going to go ahead and end that so I can introduce today's speaker. Let's see here, let me get the slide here. So we asked you that already. So I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. Her name is Susan Adams, and she is ATD's Achieving the Dream. For those of you who aren't familiar with ATD, instructional designer. She comes to us, she's been with the ATD for a while now, but she comes to us from Portland State, where she guided instructional design in her role as a senior instructional designer there. She has a lot of experience redesigning courses for online delivery, different modalities like blended learning. She's knowledgeable about open education and pretty much every aspect of online learning. She has a lot of background and experience. She's helping us here at Achieving the Dream with our Every Learner Everywhere project, as well as other instructional design supports that we have. And so she's put together a session today on strategies for rapidly moving online to really address those of you who are out there who need some really quick advice and suggestions and resources for kind of moving online very, very quickly. So with that, I would like to introduce Susan, and she's going to get started.
Great, Richard. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see everybody today, or hear everybody today in the chat. So many different people from different walks of life here, and really excited to see what your questions are at the end. Not only is it clear that we all need connection in these unpredictable times, but we can use some simple, easy to implement approaches to supporting our students' learning needs. So I'm Susan Adams, as Richard said, the instructional designer at Achieving the Dream, and I've been supporting faculty going online for over 20 years now. And I hope what I put together is not only informative, but meets your immediate needs. So many of you are being asked to very rapidly move online, and ATD wants to be sure we're helping you to make this transition by supporting you to keep an equity-minded approach. I mean, to be honest, when we have to quickly shift to something we've not done before, we do it quickly with the quickest solution, and that may not be the most equitable solution for our students. So we need to be careful in this moment such that we take the steps as we go quickly online to remember to hold the equity mind. So I'll be speaking for about 20 minutes or so, and after which we'll open up the call to hear from you in the chat, as Richard said, and we want to know what your needs are and how we can help. So our intended outcomes today are to share ways you can address COVID-19 with your students, explore options for low-tech ways to provide content to your students, and simple strategies on how to remain equity-minded when providing context to your content through direct instruction. And finally, we'll explore ways to create communication lines with your students and generate an online community. What do we mean when we're talking about equity-minded? What we're doing when we are equity-minded is creating conditions for all students to be successful by understanding that different students need different things from us to be successful. Just yesterday, I listened to a great NPR show where two of my favorite online educators, Robin DeRosa and Sean Michael Morris, spoke to the need for critical compassion. And what they're meaning is that even though we're immediately focused on logistics, what is truly required is compassion. And they coined a new term, panagogy, which they're defining as the ability to look at a situation as it really is and amplify the notion that together we can navigate uncertainty and begin to figure out what is going on and to determine how we can operate within that while showing empathy. So they suggest that we ask our students for their own suggestions on the best ways to keep in touch. They also suggest that educators bring COVID-19 into their curriculum. So whatever field you teach, ask how that field is affected by this public health crisis and what are the emerging contributions the field is making to help people in their communities. And DeRosa's quote states that what we're doing is trying to extend a sense of care to our students and build a community that's going to work together to get through the learning challenges that we have. I so appreciate this as a starting point to begin this new sort of era of learning. We also found, and Robin shared this with me, an adjusted syllabus by Brandon Bain at UNC Chapel Hill. And he's adjusted his syllabus that really speaks to and helps us to make sure we're remaining equity-minded in how we're responding to our students and how we're engaging with them. To me, it's about being transparent with our students. And he starts off with this principle that's so sobering but deeply honest. Nobody signed up for this. Not for the sickness, not for the social distancing, not for the sudden end of our collective lives together on campus. He really focuses in on the human option is the best option. We're going to prioritize supporting each other as humans. We're going to prioritize simple solutions that make sense for the most. And we cannot just do the same thing online. Some assignments are no longer possible. Some objectives are no longer valuable. So we're going to foster an intellectual nourishment, social connection, and personal accommodation. Again, when we think about parents with kids all of a sudden at home all day or having lost their job, we must think, how can we be accommodating for students juggling multiple responsibilities and sudden life changes? That was really, really inspiring to me, and just in the last few days to see the generosity of spirit and so many experts in teaching online sharing such sentiments. So with that, I'm going to next begin to get into the logistics, but I'd love to hear from you about your level of experience in teaching online, just so I get a sense of who's on the call, what kind of learning experience or online experience teaching you have. So Richard, if you wouldn't mind popping up that poll, it'll give each one of you an opportunity just to share. There we go. Choose the statement that best describes your level of experience with online learning. And I'll just give a few moments for folks to answer that poll. All right, it looks like we've got about 68% of you that have voted. We'll give it another minute here. Okay, so it looks like we've actually got kind of an even split here. Richard, if you want to go ahead and end the poll and broadcast that out, it's looking like about 30% of you have never taught online, and we've got 32% of you with some experience and about 24% who are experienced. So it's great that you're on this call, because I'm certainly going to give you some really basic ways to begin that new new ways of being online. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that, Richard, and move that over. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start. Here, when I think of online teaching, I think of three basic elements. It's important to determine how will you get content to students in the easiest and most accessible way. And also context. How can you provide context, or essentially your direct instruction in an online environment? And also connection. How will you as an instructor connect with your students? How will they connect with each other? And these elements really help to consider, okay, and from basic online, this is what we want to move forward with. Robin and Sean also shared this great tweet for a minimum viable course in one tweet. Simply send students clear bulleted email with things to do and resources. Include times when they can call or otherwise connect. You can suggest benchmarks, but essentially don't require them. And collect work via email and save into folders. That's pretty much it, right? But I'm going to teach about some technology strategies to sort of think through that in a little bit of a deeper way. So at the most basic level, you can do this via email and send material in clearly titled emails, such as week 1 materials, and only attach those week 1 materials to that email. If you have permission to use a shareable folder, you can use that as a container for your content and share that link with your students and populate it each week with an announcement email. Now, some of you will have access to a learning management system, which provides an easy to use module format to organize your materials. It also has a discussion board and often has integrated web conferencing and a gradebook and announcement tool. And that's more of the high-end tech option. And will often take some support from an instructional designer or other colleagues who have used it before to learn its tips and tricks. Whether you're sending your students content through email, uploading it to a shared folder, or creating pages in an LMS, consistency is key to help students more quickly understand your expectations, and also to help them plan their work time more effectively. And also, we want them engaging in their cognitive resources rather than hunting for the material. So typically, courses are organized into weekly modules or units of study. And I suggest creating 5 elements to your weekly modules: an introduction or overview, a list of your module outcomes, and a checklist of the readings and activities, and then link or attach the readings and videos or podcast materials, and write a focused relevancy statement for each, and I'll speak to that in a moment. And then write a module summary. In your brief module overview or introduction, you'll introduce the material, highlight main ideas or topics, and explain what students will learn. And then when you introduce the readings as attachments or in an LMS, give a brief, focused narrative that explains the purpose and the value to the students. Connect it to the course topics, the objectives, the activities, and the assignments. And this is really where you're giving your context to the content, where your direct teaching gets to happen within a text, right? Within the information of presenting the content. And then in your module summary, highlight what students learned, give a preview of the next module, and remind students about anything they need to be working on or upcoming assessment dates or project deadlines. Here's a layout, sort of a simple layout of a module that kind of gives you what I'm conceptualizing. This can be in an email or on an LMS page. And you'll see an overview here, learning outcomes. And this is for a nursing course on holistic health assessment, or this is a module within a nursing course. And then you'll see that I've listed what you'll do, also readings, and then the focus statements are right under those readings. Again, giving students some guiding questions is also a great tip to help them deepen their reading experience and understand the content a bit better. And then the layout would continue. This is just the second page. And you list the activity. We're actually going to have a discussion. This might be in the LMS, or the discussion can be in an email thread where students respond to each other in email thread. So giving a little intro there to that activity, as well as the discussion questions themselves, and then due dates, an initial post due Thursday, a response post by Sunday, and also some guidelines and possibly a rubric that you could link or attach. And then this is an example here of a module summary. So that's essentially giving that context to the content, but also the organization. Before I get on to communication, I wanted to speak a little bit about lectures. Although we're not going to go deeply into lecture delivery today in terms of recording live or pre-recorded, I'd like to share that it's the most straightforward, low-tech way to deliver a course lecture material is to type it out in a document, right, with written notes. You can also take your slide deck and put notes in the slide deck and send that out to students so they can see what you would say during each slide. Those documents can be emailed or placed in a shared folder or uploaded to the course site, depending on the tech level you're going to choose. It's important to keep your content accessible. We're aware students have varied access to Wi-Fi. Some students are accessing material on a phone. By offering different ways to access materials signals to them that you get that. So many students may only have mobile devices, so make sure you're using PDFs. LMS pages work as well on a mobile device, and they're also PDFs are much easier to read on phones and tablets, and any Dragon readers for students needing accommodation works much better on a PDF than an editable document. So when we consider communication, we've already talked about this, but essentially we can think about phone or text, email. LMSs have an announcement tool as well as a discussion forum. And also you can do live video sessions, Zoom and others. And we're not going to get into that today, but those are some of the options there. But providing consistent, clear, reliable communication from you is a crucial element of success in online teaching, especially in an emergency scenario. Good communication builds course community, creates a sense of presence, and helps students understand that this is a real course with expectations. But bear in mind that online learning will be new for most of your students too. So they'll rely on you to communicate expectations, explain clear course logistics, and provide updates in a regular, predictable way. So some of the approaches are things like offering office hours, weekly announcements, and even assignment and activity feedback could be considered a communication, whether you're doing formative or summative. Also having students do a peer review activity so they get to communicate with each other. You can assign them and they can email each other or talk to each other on the phone. And then also online activities. And I'll give you a list of those shortly for a little bit more of a high-tech approach, but you can do full class annotations on shared docs and do asynchronous discussions as I mentioned before. If you are going to go for discussions, it's important because you're in an online environment and not live to craft discussion questions that are clear and specific so the students can build off the questions for a sustained response. You also want to create discussion prompts that require complex thinking. And I have a resource for you that'll be at the end of this document of sample discussion prompts that align to Bloom's taxonomy. So going to that higher level thinking in the IS taxonomy and pyramid. Another great strategy is to assign roles to students so that they understand when and how they might respond to you or their peers. So it could be a role play or even just a responsibility such as being the summarizer of a discussion, a respondent or a connector with outside resources or concepts within the course itself. And it's important on discussion boards in the LMS that you be present by providing feedback and coaching as students go. And that can also be done within an email format. It's important that students have opportunities to get to know each other. This can be done with creative introduction prompts that allow students to share personal stories or aspects of themselves that relate to the content of the course. And here are 2 quick icebreakers that you could do where students post 3 clues to the location of their favorite place to relax. And other students have to guess where their location is. Or if you could, when and where would you travel forward or backward in time? Where would you go and in which time period? And these can be simple things that could work in any course to, again, get to that personal touch and students kind of declaring their digital identity within the course of who they are before they get cracking on the content and learning. Great channels for connecting outside of class materials and activities is to generate a water cooler or a cafe discussion board where the class can talk about current events and common interests. You could also create a social media page for the class where ideas can be shared, or watch a virtual event together and discuss it afterwards in a more personal way. You can also invite students to monitor a Twitter hashtag and report back trends or misconceptions. So communicating through email is the low tech option. So if your class size is 20 or less, you can structure the discussion around a key question or 2 per week and ask everyone to reply in that email. Again, you can designate a student or a group to summarize the discussion, and at the end, post an email to everyone, and you can rotate that role. You can also consider doing your own wrap-up email, obviously the subject line, week 8 wrap-up to make it clear, and to capture any topics that didn't get addressed or need further exploration. And a medium tech is to communicate through your learning management system. So I've seen entire online courses that have been taught all through the forum and the discussion board. So again, we're sort of inhabiting a digital space here in the LMS, and you can really utilize its tools and its spaces accordingly and with support. And then for a high-tech option, you can communicate through digital apps and the internet. And I often like to think of the internet as a one-room schoolhouse, which is never more true than ever right now for us. And these, again, I'm not endorsing all of these technologies. These are just some of the ones that I've seen in my experience to work really well. If you want to do annotation activities or a forum, you can use Slack. Padlet is great for having boards of content that students get to comment on each other's projects. And again, I talked about a Twitter hashtag. You could even have one for the course itself. And then on the phone, WhatsApp is great for connecting with international students or creating a group thread. So with that, and considering communication, I'd love to do one more poll to sort of figure out from each of you, what mode of communication are you using most with your students now? So if Richard, if you wouldn't mind popping that up, we can get a sense of where people are at the moment when they're communicating with their students. Now we can only choose one, so consider what is the one you use the most with your students right now. All right. So it looks like we're getting high in the learning management system. So many of you are using that, which is great. And then right behind that is email. So that's great to see that a lot of folks are getting into their learning management systems and figuring out how to use that.
And
so that's great.
And Susan, just there's a lot of people answering in the chat
Sure.
that are connected by phone, and we're seeing a lot of email and LMS there as well.
Okay, great. Great, wonderful. All right, that's helpful to know, and that folks are getting into the LMS. And we'll likely do another webinar, and we'll hear from you if you want that to go deeper into using a learning management system well. So lastly, I just wanted to give you a couple of ideas around being online and offering activities that you could do in class. So we'll talk about, I call them digital activities on the fly. Many of you may be doing, high touch activities such as labs, or even an art class where you're wanting students to draw. So here are some reframing of classroom-based activities that are kind of high touch. You can do sample videos where you actually do a demo and have students video themselves doing a demo or replicating what you've asked. You can also investigate various virtual labs, and more every day are being offered free to faculty and educators. So Harvard University's LabX Exchange, Merlot, and many MOOC providers. So that's something that you could Google search to find one that's relevant to your course. You could also provide raw data for analysis. So in cases where the lab includes both collection of data and its analysis, consider showing how the data can be collected and then provide some raw sets of data. This approach is not comprehensive, but having students collect and analyze their own data could be a bit hard. So keeping them engaged with parts of the lab could work well in this case. So another idea for reframing is an assignment. So writing assignments you could do peer feedback. Instructors can set up pairs or triads for students to email drafts to each other. Just as with any peer feedback process, it's most helpful to structure those discussions by sharing a rubric in advance or asking students to annotate their draft with questions so you can see what's happening in that process. Also, for a research paper, if your most important goal is source related, an annotated bibliography might also function well as a substitute assignment. If asking and answering questions is most critical, consider if a research proposal could work. So laying out the key intended aims and approaches of the project might meet similar objectives. Another is have students design their own assignments. So you can provide assignment choices, asking students to collaborate and come up with course assignments that feel relevant and motivating. Especially in this time, how COVID-19 might be impacting them, impacting the course content or the field of which you're speaking of, as I spoke earlier. Another one is having students build a portfolio or write a blog, or even ask students to create a professional Twitter account that can help them grow their personal and professional network. Or have students interview a celebrity in their field or research current trends and build a curated digital newsfeed. And then writing that blog is great, and having them kind of reflect on their learning process of the course also helps for grading in the end. Asking them what concepts what concepts and have direct application to their current practice, what concepts in the course do. Yeah, and another one I really enjoy myself personally is collaboratively annotating on a document. And that can be done in Google Docs. I also mentioned Hypothesis before, but here's sort of the pedagogical approach. You can have students have questions, highlight areas that they have questions on a particular doc, and then they can answer each other's questions right in line with that document, or a close reading annotation activity, or glosses where students look up difficult words, or even a rhetorical analysis annotation activity. And again, this is inhabiting sort of a digital space or of a document where you can annotate, and it can be great for deepening students' understanding of content and also being able to communicate with each other and the content at the same time. And the last one is a digital storytelling activity where students create a multimedia-rich digital narrative. Now, this might be a little bit too much for some of your students in terms of the technical capabilities and at least know-how that they have, but I just wanted to throw it out there. Inviting students to write a story about a day in the life of a scientist or a scholar in your field, or research a celebrity. You can also have them do infographics. There's lots of free infographics out there, or storyboard applications. But again, this is more of a high-tech approach. And I've given you a lot of low-tech options, but I just wanted to also move the needle in certain ways as you move forward you might want to consider. And then we have some digital activity banks. So if that wasn't enough for you, these resources will be emailed to you with links Seattle University has a great blended learning toolkit, and within that is this awesome list of activities that are organized via whether or not you want to do introduction or go deeper into something. It's a great categorical set of activities digitally online, and also a great book on adding some tech variety is also another downloadable free resource that gives you activities organized via motivational principles. So with that, I am pretty much finished and looking forward to getting to your questions, but I know we're also going to be hearing from Karen in a moment. I do have a resources area here that lists some of the things I've spoken of in my presentation, and many more are going to be sent to you via our ATD network. We're putting together lots and lots of resources and curating them for you to organize them in relevant topic order. So be looking forward to that in the future. And thank you so much for your attention today and your participation. think we're
Great.
going to get Karen up. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Susan. That was great. Before I introduce Dr. Stout, we have gotten a lot of questions, so we really appreciate that. We're kind of sorting through them, and we're really eager to pitch some to Susan to see if she can help us out answer some of those. But keep them coming, and we'll also be posting links to some upcoming events as well as the survey that you can access. But right now, if you could advance the slide, Susan, I'm pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Karen Stout. She's the president and CEO of Achieving the Dream, and she's joined us today just to share a few remarks with all of you and talk about kind of ATD's how we're addressing the COVID-19 crisis that we're having. So, Karen, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me, Richard?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. It's wonderful to join into the webinar today and to participate a little bit in the chat conversation, which is very active and highly engaging. So thank you for your participation. It's good to see so many names that I recognize and colleges that I know are doing great work in the Achieving the Dream network and beyond around student success and achieving equitable student success outcomes. I'm just going to make a couple of quick reflections today and try to set the stage for what I think needs to be a continuing conversation. So first of all, a few days ago, the Chronicle had an article about this great experiment around online learning and hypothesized that this might be a wonderful time to begin to assess whether this is a good environment to move to in even a more scaled and sustained way. And I responded to that with a tweet that spoke to my feeling that this is the absolute wrong time to think that we can assess whether this is a learning environment that will be conducive to all students and to supporting student success, especially equitable student success, which is something that is top of mind at this point in time, always is top of mind for ATD, but is ever more top of mind right now. And I just mentioned that students are getting Wi-Fi access in parking lots. They're driving up to their institutions to get drive-in tech support. They're handling homeschooling of their children. They're taking care of elderly parents. They have high anxiety. Many of them have never used some of the technology tools that we're introducing to them. And this is just a frightening situation and environment for them. And this webinar is helping to faculty to address, I think, some of those student hardship issues. In further reflection, I realize this is also really difficult for faculty. And that I think our success as a higher ed sector, and especially for ATD, will be measured by not just how much we care for our students in this time, but also how we care for our faculty and staff through this time. Because as you think about those hardships that I articulated for students, our faculty are facing many of those same hardships. And you get to the point when you begin to map out the hardships where you see that they come together and they are one and the same. So we're talking about care for students. I think that institutions are challenged to figure out what care for faculty might look like. There are a couple of articles that have appeared in Inside Higher Ed that really expand on this notion that we need to figure out how to care for faculty too. Colleen Flaherty did a good piece called Faculty Homework, and that was in the Chronicle a couple of days ago. And she just speaks to a couple of things that faculty are facing as they're trying to teach from their own homes. And then there's a piece by Vicki Baker in Inside Higher Ed, and I think it was this morning, although the days are running together for all of us, I think, that speaks to the need for colleges to step up with logistical and emotional supports for faculty to re-envision promotion and tenure timelines and processes, to think about tools that faculty need for cross-division consultation, to help faculty build new digital communities that are a safe environment for faculty to express frustrations with the current learning environment and to vent a little bit. It reminds me of the early work of ATD when we worked hard to create those safe spaces for faculty exploration and course redesign, and that is still really important now. I also think institutions and need to begin thinking about adjuncts and how we're supporting adjunct faculty within this environment. And it's really important for leaders to communicate early and often. So while that is not necessarily the topic for today, I think there's a whole opportunity for us as a community to explore how we can help our institutions support and care for faculty as well. So with that, I'm going to put myself on mute and listen in to some of the questions and comments. I do want to say, my Achieving the Dream team, congratulations, kudos. We went fully remote. We're in 10 days of being fully remote. We've been in rapid response with our colleges. And I think the organizations that will survive and transcend this crisis are the organizations that have deep relationships with their stakeholders and partners. And ATD historically has had that as part of our DNA. So I'm just very proud to be part of this organization and to be a part of this community. And I want to thank all the faculty and administrators that are part of today's conversation for the work that you're doing on the front lines of the student success movement.
Great. Well, thank you, Karen. It is great to, we have close to 400 people right now who are participating in this webinar today. So there certainly is a need, I think, for to provide this kind of support at this time. I think there's a real hunger for it. So we're glad that you guys showed up today, and hopefully this has been helpful. So we've gotten a lot, you know, there's nearly 400 of you, and you're all asking some good questions. So we'll do our best to answer some of your questions. And I think what we'll also try to do is, if we don't answer it or can't answer it for some reason, develop a companion document. We'll try to kind of post these common questions, maybe an FAQ or something that can accompany the session recordings and slides. So first I want to, for those of you, many of you are asking, maybe you came in late or you missed this. We are recording this today. We will post this. Someone asked a question, can you post it in you know, elsewhere besides an email to us? And yes, we're creating a resource page that's going to have these materials that'll be accessible for everyone. So the slides, the webinar recording, the chat transcripts, and if we create this FAQ as well, they'll be sharing those. So that's just, I can answer that question. Let's see. For those of you who are suggesting webinar topics, that's great. We're grabbing those, but we'll also provide a survey link to you that hopefully you can contribute any kind of ideas or recommendations for additional topics for the coming 3 weeks that we have webinars scheduled to help us kind of decide kind of what the most urgent topics are for you. So look for that a little later in the presentation. We have some. We're not only getting good questions, we're actually getting some good answers from you too. So that's really great. So some of the questions, Susan, really relate to the types of courses that have labs attached to them. There's been mention of a ceramics class, classes where it's not obvious, I guess, how to deliver the course content online. So, you know, labs are a big one, kind of classes where you have to work, you know, with your hands or some kind of, you know, physical artifact. Do you have any ideas about what you're hearing about that, or kind of approaches for that kind of issue that people are facing?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a tough one in this space. One of the pieces that might need to shift, especially in the immediate, is to provide students with demos when possible. But for example, with a ceramics class, they might not be able to have the material at their home, especially if that were happening on campus in an art studio, for example. So shifting to written formats where students are able to explain what they would do, and answering more of kind of the theoretical or even the technical aspects of doing an actual activity that requires materials. So that would be one creative solution that I have to thinking about, again, access to lab material or such art classes as ceramics. And maybe that question was not, was asked in such a way that wasn't specific to students having materials. So I'm happy to answer more specifically to an instance as well.
Great. Yeah, there's some examples, Susan, of class courses, like health courses, where there's like kind of hands-on evaluation component. You have to demonstrate something, or the ceramics one was a good one. I think folks are in addition to just moving generally to online, like how do you deal with these kind of special courses that are a little challenging online. So the other kind of bucket of questions that we seem to be getting are challenges with connectivity for students. Many colleges have begun to have Wi-Fi hotspots in their parking lots or elsewhere. There are some programs I know where you can get a portable hotspot for yourself to take home if you don't have connectivity. But how would you, in addition to some of the things that you talked about in your presentation, recommend kind of supporting those students where the digital access is a real challenge, whether it's at home or if you're under a stay-at-home order in one of these states, what are some of the ways that faculty might want to think about supporting those students?
Yeah. Well, in terms of access to the internet, that's where moving to the mobile phone as an option seems to be the best and easiest effective way to do that, which of course I gave in my presentation ways to teach with the phone. And the phone, accesses them to email, ideally there. But if you can, and we're going to put this up and I have it already, but there's a resource list of providers, like you say, Richard, that are providing free services and hotspots. So being able to have that to send to students right away, if they're having connectivity issues, is great. But also being able to give them a call on the phone. If you have, obviously, if it's a high volume of students, but being able to call them and talk through what those technical issues are and helping them work with you to redesign the activities and the expectations of the course kind of one-on-one. If you're having students with connectivity issues. If it's a lot of students with connectivity issues, we can address it in a more broader sense. But again, if possible, to give that personal touch, to kind of be creative, to think outside of the box with how to do these assignments. By that personal touch of talking to them on the phone one-on-one would be my suggestion.
Great, thank you. I think there are a set of questions around, it's not really related to the kind of hands-on lab question, but more about questions about students who have maybe aren't digitally literate necessarily. There's some folks teaching developmental education where students have struggled just kind of reading and access issues. And I think maybe you can just revisit some of the kind of low tech or ways to really kind of provide the basics for those students in these courses.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, that's something that many people are addressing, especially as we go into some co-requisite options, but really how to support sort of the tutoring side for students that are getting or needing that reading support. And you'll be amazed at some of the technologies, even around phonetics, that are out there online for students to practice that and getting sort of that individual support. And so one of the rapid responses that we're also doing with our HSS team is to consider student support services and how we move all of that online. So be sure to check with your institution to see where they're at in terms of that rapid response and reconfiguration of those services to students. And because that's not fully my wheelhouse, but I know and I'm seeing from our HSS team that that is starting to bubble up for students to get support around learning success.
Great. I think there's some still questions popping up in the chat, so we're trying to keep up. One is about, where did I? Is it? I guess it really involves kind of supporting students outside of the classroom. I don't know if you want to speak to that, or for online tutoring. Students who are kind of getting kind of supports that they usually get on campus. Do you have any ideas or suggestions for how to continue to support kind of those programs?
Yeah, we'll put that in the email too. There's a whole list, again, of advising students online and how to provide those support services that we're giving to institutions to start to implement to be able to do that. But right now, I know it's a heavy lift for faculty, but you are kind of at the front lines in being able to support students, and we want to get you what you need to support them and get them to the resources that are online for them now that used to be on campus. So we're working as quickly as we can to do that, and we'll certainly send some strategies as well as links to real live support that we're seeing come through the interwebs at the moment. So that's what we'll do.
Great. Let's see. I think we maybe have time for maybe a couple more. I think there's some questions, kind of group of questions around. So if you're a faculty member that's really kind of accustomed to classroom interaction, and even judging how students are doing by kind of the presence that you have in the classroom. Some folks are asking about how do you do that online, or what are some strategies for really, if you have this kind of gut level evaluation of students and whether they're struggling or not, how do you do that in kind of a distance environment?
Yeah. Well, really, the challenge here is shifting to text-based, right? So even if it's an annotation tool or a shared document, we're really starting to, evaluate students in their writing. It is so much of what people initially think when they're going online. But having students do their own videos or do their own audio podcast. So giving assignments where students have the option to deliver it back to you in a variety of formats, such as an infographic or a video that they can record on their phone. Again, this does require some tech capabilities for your students, and I promise you that's going to be increasing over time and is immediately increasing. But that's where you'll need to provide some tech support for that option. The other is to consider doing a live Zoom class. Now, again, that is high tech and there may be some real accessibility issues, but there's some great strategies that we are going to put together in future webinars and assets to you that can talk about how to really run a class live in a virtual space. And that can replicate that at sort of the high-end level. And then the other is, again, going a little bit back to that text-based or that video-based, is making sure you've got clear expectations to the students. They understand how they're being evaluated, and consider how to ask questions that do bring out their personality, their style, their sort of expertise around kind of having their own agency as well, to how they deliver that content back to you, not just technologically, but the content itself. And again, clear expectations are key in an online environment because they don't have the one way back and forth as quickly as they would if they were face-to-face with you.
Great, thank you. So we need to move on, but it's clear that we have your questions, and we'll kind of sort through them. And I think one thing that we'll do is actually pull out some of the great resources you're providing. Some of you have provided to to guide some of the questions that you're asking, and kind of synthesize these more and provide some links and resources. So we'll work on doing that. But I feel like we need to move on because I want to share a few things before we wrap up today. So if you could forward it. So as I mentioned at the top of this session, if you weren't here, this is part of a series that we're offering. The title of the series is Online Teaching Through Disruption. So we have 3 more webinars scheduled, and you can click on that link or use the link that's in the. We should be posting those in the chat as well for you. To find out more information. Again, the topics for the next 3 we'll decide on those hopefully by the end of this week with your feedback. So using your questions today, and also the survey link that we're hopefully Shauna will post that you can fill out a survey and give us your feedback and suggest topics. We also have another webinar this Friday. Achieving the Dream is offering a series on equity and design for holistic student supports. So the webinar on Friday is supporting students enrolled part-time during COVID-19. They have some particular challenges, and you can find out how you can support those students through that registration link. We also, part of, you have a lot of questions, you have a lot of particular circumstances. So Achieving the Dream is offering what we call one-on-one virtual consultations. Really, this is for our network colleges. So if you're part of our network and you need assistance in addressing the immediate challenges of ensuring your students not only have access to coursework online, but also the necessary advising and personal supports to help them succeed. There's 2 kind of threads here, that types of consultation, kind of instructional design consultations, similar to what we've been talking about today. So if you have particular questions, or if you're new at teaching online and you have some basic questions, or whatever it is, we're happy to kind of meet with you for around 45 minutes per session and try to answer your questions and kind of give you some tips. So there's a link there where you can register for those. And same with our holistic student supports. You can move that back there. Yeah, we have having some slide trouble. Holistic student support consultations through that link, where you can do the same thing, except around supporting students kind of outside the classroom, and especially when they're not on campus. And then finally, the last slide is we want to hear from you. Again, this is the survey that we've put together, where we can get feedback from you about, was today good? Was it helpful to you? Were you expecting something else? Please give us your feedback, as well as, as I've emphasized, please let us know what's your burning need, what are the things that we need to address, what can we put together for you for the rest of this series that will help you out. So now's your chance to do that with that survey link. And I'll ask Shauna to post that as well, if she hasn't already, maybe she has, for folks to fill out. And then if you have any questions or comments, feedback, you want to send something to our team, you can send it to teachingandlearning@achievingthedream.org. So with that, I want to thank, and please give me a round of virtual applause for Susan Adams for today's session. I thought, and hopefully was helpful. So thank you, Susan. And also I want to thank Karen Stout for her remarks as well. And thank you for coming today, and also thanks for the Achieving the Dream teaching and learning team for the support during in the background for this as well. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much.
Sure, and hang in there, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
This has been great to see all of your comments, and what a wonderful community that we can form here. So hopefully we'll see you again next Wednesday.
Great. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Take care.